This was the beginning of the end for Sega. Over 270 pages of leaked internal documents have appeared online. It's Sega of America's 1997 brand review, which includes release lists, emails, business strategy, and more. The documents are primarily dated to the first and second quarter 1996, and are designed to prep the company for the trials and tribulations in the upcoming year. And it is fascinating. The pressure felt by the Sony PlayStation is on full display while the company simultaneously deals with the looming release of the Nintendo 64. Sega of America, Saturn vs. PlayStation. How did Sony do it? Sony is generally perceived to be cheaper. This has improved, but we still suffer from early damage. Sony's product, software, looks better than ours. This is driven by our lack of delivering a product that appears to consumers to be better and advertising that focuses on this dimension. PlayStations are better merchandised than Saturn, resulting in more exposure and sampling. Sega equity has been damaged by 32X and Sega CD. Since PlayStation is newer, some consumers feel that it is technically superior. Sony has effectively leveraged their considerable equity from consumer electronics. And this is all true. Sega of America knew exactly what was killing them. And per the first bullet point, the Saturn launched for $399. You may remember Sony's famous E3 press conference.
$299.
And there's a lot of time spent here trying to mitigate and deal with that damage. For example, here's a critique of a commercial storyboard. A few concerns. First bullet point here. $249 price must be added visually or verbally. They had dropped down by $50 since launch. Key competitive assumptions. Sony PlayStation. Pricing $249 with software to $199 core sometime in the fall. Nintendo 64, not available until late fall. There's also a lot of time stressing out about software. Lack of sports titles, lack of Sonic, lack of quality compared to the PSX versions. Starting with the latter, there's a call to move away from the PlayStation porting process, preferring titles to be built from the ground up on Saturn to take advantage of the console's unique hardware. We also have a mystery Sonic title that must ship in November. In 1996, we saw Sonic 3D Blast on Genesis and simultaneously released on Saturn, and it's not clear if the Sonic they wanted to release was Sonic 3D Blast or if it's the canceled Sonic Extreme that they're referring to here. When Extreme was canceled, 3D Blast was commissioned for the Saturn, so it's possible that they are referring to that unreleased Extreme title here instead of Sonic 3D Blast, which was, of course, ultimately released in its place. Regarding sports titles, now, these days, as collectors, we scoff at the sports titles. Whatever, they're not very collectible for the most part. Some are. But for the most part, we kind of don't care, right? But you have to keep in mind, back in the day, that these titles sold systems. They kept the Genesis afloat. They made Sega so much money. They were an absolute powerhouse and a requirement for the success of Sega. Sega Sports, background. Sega Sports' share of the sports category is declining. Sports drove Sega Genesis' success. Sports is now a liability on Saturn. There are also quite a few references to the Sega Pluto, which is the Saturn remodel with the built-in internet functionality. This console, of course, never came out. On the Genesis front, we are dealing with a console very late in its life. Here you'll see a lot of stress regarding a declining market share and also some interesting tidbits showcasing release expectations for unreleased games. For example, we have multiple mentions of X-Women, an X-Men game featuring Storm, Jean Grey, and Rogue. To this day, the title is completely lost and barely any footage exists. We also have an unreleased multi-pack called Super Sonic that combines Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles into one cart. At least I think it's unreleased. I've never heard of such a thing. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments below. Another consequence of the declining market share was a massive amount of unsold carts. On the 32X front, Sega absolutely recognized its failure and began looking at the scrap value for the unused hardware. The Game Gear's future is also perceived to be uncertain, and the introduction of the Nomad, i.e. the portable Sega Genesis, caused customer confusion. Introduction of Nomad is perceived as a signal that Sega is phasing out Game Gear. Game Gear's market position is being undetermined. Game Gear is bracketed on the high end by Nomad and the low end by Game Boy. And then we have the Pico, the educational console geared toward children. Not much is said here, and it seems like there wasn't much of a future for it on the horizon. Future of Pico business is uncertain. i.e. no software development planned for fiscal year 98. So this is just a fascinating look of a Sega in decline, dealing with far too much hardware that's cannibalizing itself, like the Nomad and the Game Gear, systems that just aren't selling, competition that is too aggressive, competition that is uncertain, like the Nintendo 64. It is just a terrible and fascinating time. If you do get the opportunity to take a look at this, again, it's about 270 odd pages long. I definitely recommend you do, because again, it is just incredibly, incredibly interesting. And of course, we all know after the Saturn, Sega moved on to make the wonderful Dreamcast, but it just didn't quite make it, and Sega left the hardware industry entirely. Again, truly, this era is the beginning of the end. So it is an unfortunate tale, but if you do enjoy content like this and learning more about gaming history, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, all that good stuff, and I hope to see you all back for the next video. Take care.